Family betrayal hurts deeper than any wound. When trust breaks between blood relatives, the pain cuts straight to your soul. I never thought my son's choice would devastate me. She's just so loud and big. Did you see the way she was dancing? Like some kind of fat pig. Those words sliced through me like a knife as I stood frozen behind the restroom door at my only son's engagement party. The voice belonged to Tanya Brooks, my son Darnell's fiancée, the woman who just pledged to become part of our family. I wasn't meant to hear it, but I did. Every single word. My heart hammered against my ribs as hot tears threatened to spill. But Loretta McLean doesn't cry in public bathrooms, not even when she's just been gutted by the woman her son loves. If you're hearing my story now, please hit that like button and subscribe to support stories like mine. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Where are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. I'm 68 years old. After 40 years as a nurse, I've seen human nature at its rawest. I've held hands as life slipped away, celebrated miraculous recoveries, and learned that dignity matters more than anything. That dignity carried me through raising my son alone after my husband Gerald died in that factory accident, through night shifts and tight budgets, through every sacrifice to ensure Darnell would have opportunities I never had. My modest home in Maryland became our sanctuary. Those magnolia trees I planted when Darnell was just learning to walk now tower over the street. My rose garden, the envy of the neighborhood, blooms each spring like a promise kept. This house holds every memory. Darnell's height marks on the kitchen door frame, the dent in the living room wall from his teenage basketball mishap, the kitchen where I taught him to make his father's favorite cornbread. When Darnell brought Tanya home that first Sunday, something felt off. She was stunning, tall, honey brown skin, designer clothes, but her smile never quite reached her eyes. She glanced around my living room like she was inspecting a cheap motel. "Can I get you some sweet tea?" I'd asked. She pursed her perfect lips. "Oh, I don't really do sugar." The way she said it made me feel like my hospitality was somehow beneath her. But I swallowed my discomfort. My son glowed when he looked at her. He'd talk about how brilliant she was at her PR firm, how her ambition pushed him to be better. I wanted to support his happiness, even as unease settled in my stomach. "This house has so much character," she'd say, fingertips barely touching the floral wallpaper I'd chosen 2 decades ago. I bit my tongue when she asked Darnell, right in front of me, "Doesn't your mom's cooking seem a bit heavy?" As if my collard greens were an embarrassment. Standing in that bathroom at their engagement party, her cruel words confirmed what my heart already knew. This woman saw me as an obstacle, not family. I should have known then that the woman entering our lives would try to tear everything apart. My relationship with my son, my dignity, and even the home I'd built brick by brick. Would you have confronted her right there, or would you have done what I did next? I still remember the day Darnell called, excitement vibrating in his voice. "Ma, I met someone. Her name's Tanya. She's amazing." My son rarely gushed about women. At 35, he'd focused on building his career as a civil engineer. His father would have been proud of the man he'd become. Responsible, hardworking, thoughtful. "Tell me about her," I said, settling into my porch swing, phone pressed to my ear. "She works in PR. We met at this networking mixer downtown. She just walked up to me, introduced herself, and handed me her card. Said my firm should hire her company for the new riverfront project." I chuckled. "Bold. That's what I love about her, Ma. She knows what she wants." They dated for 6 months before I met her. Darnell would come for Sunday dinners alone, always with an excuse about Tanya's busy schedule. In hindsight, those were warnings. When he finally brought her to my home, she arrived in a car that cost more than my annual pension. Her heels clicked sharply against my worn hardwood floors, her eyes cataloging everything in my living room. "It's so cozy," she said, emphasis making it clear cozy wasn't a compliment. Throughout dinner, she barely touched my food. When Darnell proudly told her I'd made his father's special recipe, she smiled thinly and said, "I usually follow a clean eating plan," as if my cooking was somehow dirty. Each visit brought new microaggressions. She'd run her fingers along my bookshelf and ask, "Have you considered updating your decor? This floral pattern is so vintage." Or she'd glance at my family photos and say, "Digital frames are so much cleaner, don't you think? All these dusty frames take up so much space." My home, the home where I had raised my son, where I had grieved my husband, where I had built a life of quiet dignity, was apparently an embarrassment to her. One evening, as I served coffee in my grandmother's china cups, the ones with tiny pink roses that Gerald had carefully packed when we moved here, Tanya set hers down without taking a sip. "Don't you have any modern mugs? These feel like they belong in a museum." Darnell jumped in. "Tanya's just used to a different aesthetic, Ma. Her apartment downtown is all glass and chrome." I smiled. "Well, we all have our preferences. These cups remind me of your grandmother, Darnell. She taught me how to make the biscuits you love." Tanya's phone buzzed. She checked it, then announced, "We should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Darnell hugged me tight. "Thanks for dinner, Ma. It was delicious as always." When he stepped outside to start the car, Tanya lingered in my doorway. Her smile disappeared. "Darnell deserves better than this," she said quietly, gesturing vaguely at my home. "You should want that for him, too." The comment stung like a slap. Before I could respond, she flashed her perfect teeth again and air-kissed my cheek. "Thanks for dinner, Loretta." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the weight of her words settling on my shoulders. What did she mean by better than this? Better than the home filled with love and memories? Better than homemade food prepared with care? Better than me? 2 months later, Darnell called with news. "We're engaged, Ma. I proposed last night at Riverstone Restaurant." My heart both soared and sunk. "Congratulations, baby. Are you happy?" "So happy, Ma. We're planning an engagement party. Tanya's handling everything." Of course she was. The engagement party was when everything changed forever. The invitation arrived in thick cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering. "Celebrate the engagement of Tanya Brooks and Darnell McLean." Not McLean and Brooks. Her name first, a small detail that nonetheless caught my attention. The venue was the Azure, a rooftop lounge downtown with panoramic city views. Nothing like the church hall celebration I'd imagined. I spent weeks finding the right dress, a navy blue number with delicate beading that my church friend Ruby helped me select. "You look stunning, Loretta," she assured me as we stood in the boutique, "like royalty." The night of the party, I took special care with my makeup, styled my silver-streaked hair, and dabbed on my special occasion perfume, the one Gerald had given me on our last anniversary. I packed a homemade peach cobbler in a beautiful serving dish. Some things shouldn't be left to caterers. When I arrived, the elevator opened to reveal a wonderland of white orchids, champagne towers, and waiters in black tie. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The city twinkled below through floor-to-ceiling windows. Tanya spotted me immediately. She wore a sleek white jumpsuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her eyes flicked to the dish in my hands, her smile tightening. "Loretta, you didn't need to bring anything," she said, taking the cobbler and immediately handing it to a server. "We have a full dessert spread from Bellini's." I watched my cobbler disappear into the kitchen, likely never to be seen again. Throughout the evening, Tanya kept me at a distance from her high-powered friends and colleagues. When introductions were unavoidable, she'd say, "This is Darnell's mother," never my name, as if my identity began and ended with my son. At the dinner table, she seated me far from Darnell between two strangers who talked across me about vacation homes and investment portfolios. As champagne flowed, Tanya's true feelings emerged more clearly. She clinked her glass for attention and began telling the story of meeting Darnell. "When I saw him at that networking event, I just knew he had potential. Of course, he needed some polishing. You should have seen his wardrobe before I took him shopping." Everyone laughed. My son's face flushed, but he smiled good-naturedly. "And wait until you hear about the first time I visited his mother's house. I was like, 'Oh, honey, we need to introduce you to modern furniture.'" More laughter. I maintained my smile, even as my chest tightened. "Oh, Darnell, maybe we should get your mom a personal stylist for the wedding. That dress is a bit mature, don't you think?" Her bridesmaids giggled behind manicured hands. I straightened our shoulders and said evenly, "Oh no, sweetheart, I've been dressing myself for 68 years just fine." A few guests chuckled appreciatively. Tanya's eyes narrowed slightly. Later, needing a moment alone, I excused myself to the restroom. That's when I overheard Tanya and her maid of honor in the hallway. "She's just so loud and big. Did you see the way she was dancing? Like some kind of fat pig." The words froze me in place. I'd faced discrimination, struggled through poverty, and survived loss, but this casual cruelty from someone who should be family cut deeper than I thought possible. I took 3 deep breaths, straightened my navy blue dress, reapplied my lipstick, then walked out with my head high past Tanya and her friend, nodding politely as they fell silent. For the rest of the evening, I smiled, I danced, I congratulated well-wishers, I hugged my son and told him how proud I was. I even complimented Tanya on the beautiful party. Nobody would ever know how much I was hurting inside. My mama taught me long ago that class isn't about money or status. It's about how you treat people, especially when they've wounded you. But what Tanya didn't realize was that dignity can't be bought. The weeks following the engagement party brought a steady stream of wedding updates, none of which included my input. Tanya had chosen a venue, a luxury hotel ballroom, a caterer, a celebrity chef, and even the color scheme, champagne and blush. When I casually mentioned family traditions, like the lace handkerchief my mother carried at her wedding that I'd saved for Darnell's bride, Tanya smiled tightly. "That's sweet, Loretta, but we're going for a more contemporary aesthetic, nothing too old-fashioned." My traditions were apparently outdated, my recipes too heavy, my home too modest, my existence too inconvenient. Darnell noticed my withdrawal. He called more frequently, stopped by unannounced with coffee on Sunday mornings. During one such visit, sitting in my garden among the roses, he asked, "Is everything okay with you and Tanya, Ma?" I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. "We're very different people, baby, but we both love you." He squeezed my hand. "She's just nervous about the wedding. She wants everything perfect." Perfect according to whose standards, I wondered, but I kept that thought to myself. Then came the Sunday that changed everything. Tanya arrived with her mother, Vivian Brooks, a woman I'd heard about but never met. Vivian emerged from her Mercedes like a queen granting an audience. Tall and slender like her daughter, with the same honey-brown skin and calculating eyes, but 25 years more polished. Diamond earrings caught the light.
Her designer pantsuit probably cost more than my monthly pension. "So this is the famous Loretta," she said, air kissing both my cheeks. "Tanya's told me so much about you." I doubted any of it was flattering. Over dinner, Vivian inspected my home with the same barely concealed disdain as her daughter. She touched my tablecloth. "Is this cotton? I only use Egyptian linen for dining." She tasted my collard greens. "Interesting flavor. Have you considered a plant-based diet? It's done wonders for my skin." She examined my family photos. "How quaint to keep physical prints. Everything's digital in our home." Our home. As if she and Tanya shared the same residence. I'd soon learn how significant that distinction was. After dessert, a sweet potato pie that Vivian barely touched, Tanya cleared her throat and reached for Darnell's hand. "Loretta, we've been thinking about the future. After the wedding, we want to start fresh. New beginnings." Something in her tone set off alarm bells. "Darnell and I have been talking, and we think it would make sense to sell this house. We could use the money as a down payment on a bigger place, maybe move closer to the city." The room went silent. Even the birds outside seemed to stop singing. "This house is my home," I said slowly. "I raised you here. I'm not selling." Tanya waved her hand dismissively. "Of course, Mama Loretta. It's a little outdated. We want something more modern." I noticed how she said Mama Loretta, like she was addressing a child's doll. "The real estate market in this neighborhood is surprisingly robust. You could make quite a profit." Vivian chimed in, as if I'd asked for her expertise. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to defend our home with all its memories, but he stared at his plate, conflict written across his face. "Darnell?" I prompted. He glanced between Tanya and I, clearly torn. "Ma, we're just talking about options. Nothing's decided." But in that moment, I saw how it would go. The woman who called me a fat pig was now suggesting I sell the home where I built my life, where I raised my son, where every corner held a memory of my late husband. And my son, my pride, my heart, couldn't even look me in the eye. That night, after they left, I sat on my porch swing, watching fireflies dance across my garden. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was Gerald teaching Darnell to throw a baseball in the backyard. It was Christmas mornings and graduation celebrations. It was 40 years of life. How could I make my son understand that without sounding like I was forcing him to choose? 3 weeks later came an invitation that would change everything.
The invitation arrived in a gold-embossed envelope. Brunch at Vivian's new home in Oakwood Heights, the most exclusive gated community in the county. Places where people like me only entered as housekeepers or gardeners. "You must come," Vivian had insisted over the phone. "See how the other half lives." The Sunday of the brunch, Darnell picked me up. I wore my church dress, powder blue with pearl buttons, and my good shoes. He seemed tense, his fingers drumming the steering wheel. "Ma, just try to be open-minded today, okay?" My chest tightened. "When have I not been, Darnell?" He sighed. "Tanya says you're resistant to change, that you don't want us to grow." The accusation stung. "I want your happiness, always have." We arrived at a gated entrance with uniformed guards. One glance at Darnell's name on the visitors list, and the massive iron gate swung open, revealing a neighborhood of sprawling estates with manicured lawns. Vivian's house, or rather mansion, sat at the end of a circular driveway, 3 stories of glass and stone with fountains bubbling on either side of the marble steps. 14,000 square feet, Tanya announced, meeting us at the door. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, indoor pool, and a wine cellar. She wore white linen, diamonds at her ears, casual brunch attire, apparently.
Inside, the foyer opened to a great room with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake. Everything gleamed: the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the white furniture untouched by life. "It's very clean," I managed, clutching my handbag. "Clean lines, clean living. Not everyone appreciates minimalism. It requires a certain sophistication." The dig wasn't subtle. Over brunch, tiny portions of food I couldn't pronounce, Vivian dominated the conversation with tales of European vacations, charity galas, and her country club connections. "We've always lived well," she said, refilling my champagne flute I'd barely touched. "Tanya was raised with certain expectations." Tanya nodded. "Which is why this wedding needs to reflect our standard of living." She turned to Darnell. "Darling, we really should revisit the guest list. Quality over quantity." Translation: my friends weren't welcome. "And, Loretta, perhaps we should discuss your outfit for the ceremony. Something slimming, maybe. Black is always flattering for women of a certain size." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Tanya smirked. "See, this is the kind of environment we're used to now. Darnell deserves to live like this." Before I could respond, the doorbell chimed. Vivian's face flickered with something. Concern? Fear? Moments later, a uniformed housekeeper appeared. "Miss Brooks, Mr. DeVoe is here to see you." Vivian's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. "Now? I wasn't expecting—" A tall, distinguished black man in his late 70s entered without waiting for permission. His gray suit spoke of old money, real money. His eyes, sharp, observant, took in the room in one sweeping glance. "Vivian," he said, his deep voice filling the space, "I see you're enjoying the place." Tanya looked between her mother and the stranger. "Mom, what's going on?" Mr. DeVoe chuckled, a sound without humor. "Oh, your mother didn't tell you. I own this house. I let her live here temporarily. But Vivian, your lease is up. I need my property back." The silence that followed was absolute. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. "But, Clarence, you said—" "I said you could stay until I made other arrangements. And I've made them. My nephew is moving in next month." Tanya's face drained of color. "Mom, what is he talking about? You said you bought this place." Vivian's hand trembled as she set down her glass. "It's complicated, darling." "Not really," Mr. DeVoe corrected. "Your mother needed an impressive address to maintain certain appearances. I needed someone to keep the place occupied while my nephew finished his medical residency. A temporary arrangement, which she clearly misrepresented." I sat very still, watching the perfect facade crumble. The mansion wasn't theirs. The wealth wasn't real. The superiority they'd wielded like a weapon was a fiction. Word spread like wildfire. You can't live in a $5 million mansion without neighbors noticing and talking, especially when the true owner shows up to reclaim his property. Vivian and Tanya had crafted an elaborate illusion. For months, they'd been entertaining in a house that wasn't theirs, claiming wealth they didn't possess, and looking down on others from a pedestal built on sand. 3 days after the brunch disaster, my neighbor Ruby stopped by with fresh tomatoes from her garden and piping hot gossip. "Heard your future in-laws are frauds," she said, settling into my porch swing. "Marjorie's daughter works at the country club, says Vivian's membership is suddenly under review after her check bounced." I kept my face neutral. People go through hard times. Ruby raised an eyebrow. Hard times are one thing, pretending to own a mansion is another. Within a week, Tanya's social media went quiet. No more posts about charity galas or designer shopping sprees. Her close friends stopped tagging her. The women who'd laughed at her jokes at the engagement party now whispered about her deception. Meanwhile, Darnell grew distant from both Tanya and me. He buried himself in work, declining Sunday dinners with vague excuses. I gave him space. Some revelations need time to settle. 2 weeks after the brunch, he appeared on my doorstep at 9 p.m., looking exhausted. "Can I come in, Ma?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table where he'd done homework, where we'd shared countless meals, where we'd grieved his father. "He didn't know," he said finally, "about the house, about any of it." I squeezed his hand. "Of course you didn't. Tanya keeps saying it's not a big deal, that everyone enhances their image." He rubbed his face. "Is that true, Ma? Does everyone lie about who they are?" My heart ached for him. "No, baby, not everyone." "She wanted me to sell this place," he said, looking around our kitchen with new eyes. "This home where I grew up. For what? An illusion?" I stayed silent, letting him work through it himself. "And the way she talked to you at the engagement party," he shook his head. "I heard rumors about things she said, about you." My stomach clenched. "Darnell, did she call you names, Ma? Tell me the truth." I considered lying to protect him, but hadn't there been enough deception? "She called me a fat pig," I said quietly. "At the engagement party, I overheard her in the hallway." His face crumbled. "And I didn't defend you. I didn't even know." "You weren't meant to know. That's how people like Tanya operate, showing one face to some, another to others." He stared at his hands. "The wedding's in 6 weeks. The deposits are paid. Everyone's expecting it. What are you expecting, Darnell? What do you want?" He looked lost, my strong, confident son suddenly adrift. "I don't know anymore." The next few weeks brought tense dinners and hushed arguments between Darnell and Tanya. She'd show up at my house unannounced, tearfully apologizing for any misunderstandings, then immediately pivot to wedding details as if nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Vivian and her designer clothes disappeared from the mansion in Oakwood Heights. Rumors placed her in a modest apartment downtown, though she still drove her Mercedes, at least until it was repossessed outside the beauty salon. Tanya grew increasingly desperate as her wedding date approached. The venue suddenly didn't feel right. The guest list needed refinement. The honeymoon destination wasn't exclusive enough. Each change coincided with another friendship falling away, another invitation rescinded, another social door closed. One evening, Darnell stopped by after work. He sat heavily on my sofa, his eyes red-rimmed. "Tanya's been lying about everything, Ma. Not just the house, her job title, her college degree, even her family background." He looked up devastated. "Who am I marrying?" I sat beside him, feeling his pain like it was my own. "Only you can answer that." "I loved who I thought she was." "I know, baby, that's the hardest part." He leaned his head against my shoulder, just like when he was a boy. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid for believing in someone. That's called trust." He straightened up, resolution forming in his eyes. "I need to talk to her. Really talk." I nodded, dread and hope battling in my chest. My son was finally seeing clearly, but the pain of that clarity would cut deep. 1 month before the wedding date, everything finally shattered. The ring arrived in a small velvet box on my doorstep, 2 carats of diamond and broken promises, accompanied by a note in Darnell's handwriting. She returned it. I called him immediately. "Are you okay?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I will be." He came over that evening and told me everything. How he confronted Tanya about her lies, big and small. How she deflected, crying that he was attacking her when she was already down. How the conversation had spiraled into revelations neither of them could come back from. "She didn't even deny calling you names," he said, his voice hollow. "She just said you needed to modernize if you wanted respect, like dignity was something you could buy at a department store." I made him his favorite meal, fried chicken, macaroni and cheese,
collard greens, comfort food for a wounded heart. The worst part, he continued, pushing food around his plate, is that she didn't call off the wedding because she realized she was wrong. She called it off because she found out about Mr. DeVoe's nephew. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. What about him? He's 34, single, and inheriting part of his uncle's real estate empire. Darnell's laugh held no humor. Apparently, that makes him a better investment than a civil engineer with a modest salary and a mother who lives in an outdated house. The betrayal cut him deep. For weeks, he moved through life mechanically. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I worried about him, but knew some journeys can't be rushed. 3 months after the broken engagement, Ruby insisted I join her church group's community garden project. You need to get out of that house. All that nurturing energy of yours needs somewhere to go. At the community garden, I met a young woman named Denise Foster, a kindergarten teacher with a ready smile and soil-stained jeans. She was planting tomato seedlings, patiently showing neighborhood children how to water without drowning the fragile plants. You've got a good touch with those little ones, I commented. She laughed. They teach me more than I teach them. Kids know what's real. Something about her openness reminded me of myself at her age. When she mentioned needing help with a classroom garden project, I volunteered Darnell's engineering expertise without thinking twice. Ma, I don't know anything about classroom gardens, he protested when I told him. You know about structures and water flow. That's enough. Besides, when's the last time you did something just to be helpful? He grudgingly agreed. One Saturday turned into regular volunteering. The sadness in his eyes gradually lifted. He started coming to Sunday dinners with stories about Miss Foster's classroom antics and the birdhouse they were designing together. 6 months later, he brought Denise to dinner. She arrived with a homemade banana pudding and genuine compliments about my rose garden. When I brought out the family photo albums, she asked thoughtful questions about Gerald in our early years. Your home has such heart, she said, running her hand along the worn kitchen counter. You can feel the love in these walls. After dinner, as Denise helped me wash dishes, insisting despite my protests, Darnell stepped onto the porch for a phone call. She looked out the window at him, her expression soft. He talks about you all the time, how strong you are, how you raised him with such clear values. We had our struggles, I admitted. That's what makes it real. She handed me a dried plate. You know, when he first told me about the almost wedding, I couldn't understand how anyone could walk away from him. Now I'm just grateful she did. As for Tanya and Vivian, life has a way of revealing truth over time. The last I heard, they'd moved to a neighboring state. No mansion, no Mercedes, no social circle. Tanya's attempt to charm Mr. DeVoe's nephew had failed spectacularly when he'd already heard about the gold-digging mother-daughter duo from his uncle. Sometimes, when I'm tending my roses or baking Gerald's cornbread recipe, I think about how close my son came to a lifetime with someone who measured worth by price tags rather than character. How nearly I came to being pushed out of his life by people building castles on clouds. I never sold my house. These walls have witnessed too much love, too much growth to be abandoned for someone else's definition of progress. True wealth, I've learned, isn't measured in square footage or designer labels. It's built through authenticity, integrity, and the courage to remain dignified even when others try to diminish you. And as I watched Darnell and Denise planning their future, a modest wedding with meaningful traditions, a home they can actually afford, a partnership built on mutual respect, I know he's learned that lesson too. If you're still with me, I want to thank you. Sharing this story wasn't easy, but sometimes the hardest stories are the ones most worth telling. If you're finding value in my experience, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. Life doesn't always give us clean victories or perfect justice. Sometimes the win is simply maintaining your dignity when others try to strip it away. When Tanya called me a fat pig, she thought my size determined my worth. When Vivian suggested selling my home, she believed her false status trumped my genuine memories. They saw my modest lifestyle as something to mock, rather than the result of choices made with integrity. What they never understood was that I wasn't living small, I was living true. We all face people who try to make us feel less than. People who measure everything, homes, bodies, bank accounts, against arbitrary standards. People who confuse possessions with character. The hardest part for me wasn't the insults or the condescension. It was watching my son get caught in the crossfire, torn between the woman who raised him and the woman who promised him a glossier future. "Ma," Darnell said recently, sitting in my garden while Denise helped me prune roses, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd sold this house like Tanya wanted." I snipped a dead stem. "What would have happened?" "I'd have lost everything real in my life for something that wasn't even true." He shook his head. "How do you stay so calm through all of it? I would have exploded." The answer was simple. Dignity can't be bought and it can't be taken unless you hand it over. My mother taught me that lesson picking cotton in Georgia fields. My husband reinforced it working double shifts at the factory. I passed it to my son through quiet consistency rather than grand gestures. When the wedding was called off, many expected me to gloat, to say, "I told you so," or spread gossip about Tanya's deception. But revenge is a poor substitute for peace. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with Darnell, on Sunday dinners where conversation flowed freely again, on watching him rediscover his worth beyond what someone else projected onto him. Next spring, Darnell and Denise will marry in my backyard under the magnolia trees Gerald and I planted when we first moved in. No crystal chandeliers or champagne fountains, just good food, genuine laughter, and a community that has weathered storms together. Denise asked if she could incorporate my grandmother's lace handkerchief into her bouquet. "Something borrowed with real history," she said, understanding the value of connections that can't be purchased. For those of you facing your own Tanyas and Vivians, people who make you question your worth based on external measures, remember this: a house built on lies will always collapse. Your foundation of authenticity will outlast their facades. Would I have done anything differently? Perhaps I would have spoken up sooner when I overheard Tanya's cruel words. Maybe I would have had a direct conversation with my son about my concerns rather than silently enduring for his sake. But the outcome? I wouldn't change a thing. My son learned that character reveals itself over time. I reinforced that my worth isn't determined by others' judgments. And together, we remember that home isn't about square footage. It's about where your heart can truly rest. I'm curious, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted Tanya directly? Would you have sold your beloved home to please your child? Or would you have stood your ground as I did? Let me know in the comments below. And please don't forget to subscribe if my story touched you. There's strength in sharing our truths with one another. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Remember, true wealth isn't what's in your wallet. It's what remains when all the trappings are stripped away.